Hello, you're listening to the Eric McKenna Project.
And thanks for coming, man.
Man, it's a pleasure. It's been a long time, man.
Been a long time, and I appreciate you doing this.
I mean, you just said it was 10 years since we've last caught up, and social media makes it feel a whole lot different, but it's
it was a quick. I think the last time I saw you, I think you and I grabbed a bite to eat. I think it was 2010.
Yeah. No, thanks for having me in, man. It's just good to catch up and see how you're doing. And
I've been following you the entire time, and you got a family now, married with a family.
Yes.
How the hell did that happen?
Dude, I hit the lottery, man. There's no doubt about it. You ask anybody, they're like, why did she marry you? I don't know, but she did.
You saved me from asking.
I'm lucky. So, no, I've been told by friends and friends' fathers that, was she sober? Like, you married up. Yeah, I did. No, it's awesome. So I got a 4-year-old now, and
God bless you.
we just went skiing for the second time yesterday. Took her skiing a few weeks ago.
Where?
With my sister, Seven Springs.
Okay.
And then, since we're home this winter, I bought a weekday season pass for Seven Springs, Laurel, and Hidden Valley. So took her to Hidden Valley yesterday.
Yeah.
And I did not hold her a single run. She skied the entire day.
Really? How old now? 4, you said?
4, yep.
Wow.
So the second day out, I had some tip holders on her, and she just crushed it, man. Like, first run of the day, I'm like, do you need my help? And she was like, no, Daddy, I know how to do this. And so these little tip holders just help keep her skis connected, and she can make a pizza with them. And we did a couple of laps on Boomerang, I think it is, whatever the easy one at Hidden Valley is. And then I took her up the magic carpet a couple of times.
Wow.
And I took the tip holders off of her, and she skied 4 or 5 laps in the beginner area without tip holders. And then we went
at 4.
And then we went to the top of the hill, and she skied her last run of the day without tip holders the whole way down. Fell one time, got a little stricken up, like, I was going too fast. But I think that was a combination of not enough food and just getting exhausted.
I bet.
I mean, she's 4. I tried to get her out last year, and I just didn't have the courage, which is crazy because before we ever met, I taught skiing for 6 years. So I've taught like 2.5, 3, 4-year-olds all the way up to 7 for years.
Right.
But then I've been out of it for like 15 years.
Right.
And 20 years. So yeah, she crushed it, man. Like, super proud.
I bet.
So yeah, so my wife is now she wants to start skiing with us because she's like, well, you're having fun. I don't want to miss out on this. And I'm like, I've been trying to get you to ski for years, and you haven't wanted to. And she's like, well, we didn't have a kid then. So
yeah.
Now she wants to, which is awesome because what do you do in the wintertime during COVID if you can't get outside and have some fun?
Yeah, what the hell have you been doing during COVID?
Man, so I left the newspaper in March of 19, right as COVID was hitting.
Right, Tribune Review, right?
Yeah, I was at the Tribune Review in Greensburg as a staff photographer, and we had a round of layoffs, and I was in that first round.
Right.
And it was before it was essentially declared a pandemic and a national emergency, so we were... That first round was outside of the requirements to be brought back on to get PPP. At the same time, though, my daughter's daycare closed down for months.
Wow.
They were closed down until July, I think.
Wow.
So I would have had to have left my work anyways.
Yeah.
And so, and I would have needed to, not only because of that, but because if I were going to continue working, my daughter would have, and my wife was working, my daughter would have had to be with grandparents. And if I'm the one who's out on newspaper assignments, I'm the one who's at risk of COVID.
Got it.
We have had one guy get COVID. At least one photographer ended up with COVID. I think a couple of reporters. And so I would have, it's been in a roundabout way the biggest blessing of my life, because I've now had going on a year of solo dad time with my daughter to just watch her grow and come out of a shell.
Amazing,
so she went from this like shy 3.5-year-old when COVID started to this outgoing, hanging out with dad and his buddies, working with Papa and my dad's friends as we're remodeling a house, and just came out of this shell and like went from meek and timid to like I can do anything, which has been awesome.
Yeah.
So So when I look at COVID, I look at it and say it's been the worst year financially and business-wise that I've ever dealt with. And I started my business in 2007 during the recession. So to say that it's worse than that,
I remember.
But yeah, it's gone from I'm working every day at the newspaper to I'm home every day, and I'm managing a 4-year-old, which is
good luck.
A major life change. But it's been really, really cool. So we've had just an awesome summer of just being outside and hiking and playing and riding bikes and not a whole lot of travel. We got up to Michigan once. So when we have a house in Canada, and that was the border's still shut down.
Right.
So we haven't been able to go to our cottage up there. So we went to the UP of Michigan and hung out for a week as a family and let her swim in. I think she swam in Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, and Superior, Michigan. And then what's the other one right there? Other side.
Ontario?
Is it Ontario? It might be Ontario. So she was she got to play in the water, and we got to hang out and socially distance ourselves from everybody and just see a beautiful part of the country that we hadn't been to before. So as a fly fisherman and a Hemingway lover, it was just awesome to we made our way up. We fished on the Ausable River at Ausable Gates Lodge, which is a very famous Michigan fishery. They actually have their own. The Ausable River is famous for their own float boat, like their own drift boats.
Okay.
So they use these really long, 16 to 20 foot canoes, but they're flat bottomed and they have a platform for fishing off of. And like guys fish in the flats in Florida where they pull their boats along, well, they use these skinny flats boats to fish in this river in Michigan. And it's it's famous just on the Ausable River.
Wow.
So you go to Montana or you go to Wyoming or Colorado, and typically you float in like a hard-shell drift boat, which is wider and deeper and really stable. And it's one guy at the oars, and he's rowing in the middle, and you've got a fisherman in the front and a fisherman in the back.
Huh.
Or you go in a raft with a platform that you can fish off the front and the back. And again, same thing, like one guy in the middle rowing it like a rowboat. Well, the guide stands on the back on a platform with this long pole, and he guides you down these rivers or down the Ausable River on this specialized boat. And it's wild. I mean, they need to use it. These boats are 16, 18, 20 foot long. It's crazy. And they're no wider than a canoe, but you can stand up and fish off the front of it while the guide is pulling you along. And it's crazy. Wild. But beautiful, beautiful stream.
I bet.
And then a lot of just hanging out outside, getting out of the house, because when you have a small house and 3 people are home.
You took up running, right?
Yeah, and I took up running in June of 2019.
Okay. What spurred you to do that? That's well before COVID.
Yeah, so that's before COVID. So I was in Colorado in 19 in the spring with a buddy of mine. We were fishing on the Eagle River. Okay. And so we left Denver, went down the Eagle, we're fishing on the Eagle, and then we're going to Carbondale to go skiing. So Carbondale is in between Glenwood Springs and Aspen, right. And his brother and his brother's girlfriend live there, and they're both extreme athletes. So Pete and his brother.
Yeah, but running's not extreme, right?
No, not at
the
all.
way you now do it.
No. I mean, but so we go to Aspen Highlands, and we hike to the top of Highlands Bowl. So you take a lift most of the way, and then it's only 1,000-foot climb to the top.
Okay.
And that 1,000-foot climb almost killed me. I mean, I was crushed. I'm at the top and I'm sweating, and I'm like, I just need water. And I was so out of shape. And so we get to the bottom. He was like, "You want to go do that again?" And I'm like, "No. Can we just stay on the lifts, dude? I'm crushed." And this is our second run of the day.
Okay.
So we get to the bottom. We ski for a few more hours, and then we end up going. And then we go and we do some more fishing. And we get back, and we're talking to so I'm with my buddy Bert. And we're talking to his brother's girlfriend, and Sammy, who's an amazing athlete. She was a skimo racer, which is like ski mountaineering, and she's a guide, backcountry ski guide and climbing guide, and a Scarpa USA athlete. So Scarpa is a mountaineering company that makes high-end technical mountaineering boots, climbing shoes, but they also make ski mountaineering boots.
Okay.
And she had just been in the San Juans for a week shooting with Scarpa, and they had done 25,000 feet of vertical, all self-powered.
Wow.
So they hiked their way in, hiked up to on skis, with all of their gear for the week to a lodge or a cabin. Really, it's just a ski cabin, and then they skied out of there. And she was like, "Oh yeah, we did like 25,000 feet this week." And I'm like, "Man, I just did 1,100 and I'm crushed." And all I want to do is learn to backcountry ski. And I was like, I told Bert, I was like, "Dude, I can't come out here and ski with you guys. I can't. I'm a risk at this point. Like, if I'm that tired after a 1,000-foot climb,
right,
I'm dangerous to go and do a 5,000 or 6,000 foot ski ascent."
Okay.
And in my defense, like, we were pushing it. I wasn't the slowest guy up the mountain. I was definitely passing locals, but then I was watching myself get passed by athletes who were running up past me. And I'm taking a break and unzipping my jacket and like overheating. And like, I'm watching this dude just like skis on his shoulder, hike up the mountain. It's not even anything. So I got back that summer and work at the paper was stressful. And I just needed to find a way to like get my head cleared.
Yeah.
And so I told my wife, I was like, I think I'm going to start running. And she was like, yeah. You always say that. you make it a week.
Typical man speak there.
Yeah. I was like, well, I'm going to go for a run. And I went for a quote unquote run. And I think I walked 2 miles in 30 minutes.
Okay.
And I did the same thing the next day and the next day. And it took me like 2 weeks before I could finally run a sustained 2 miles in like 19, 20 minutes.
Got it.
So I got down to like a 10-minute mile by week 2, but it was certainly a painful 10-minute mile.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, I just kept on going. And then I was like, I'm going to sign up for like a half marathon on Buffalo Creek, which is up in like Sarver, Butler area. And then I got injured. So
how long from the time you started until you ran the half?
Well, I never have run the half.
Okay.
So I started running in June.
You went right to the 70.
I haven't run that yet either. So I went in June, I ran my first 2 miles.
Okay.
And then I was going to run a half marathon in October.
Okay. This is of 19.
Of 19. And I ended up getting injured. So I pushed my longest run to date was 10 miles Labor Day weekend.
Okay.
And then, so I ran 10 miles, and then I was covering the Labor Day parade downtown, and I walked another 5 or 6. And the following day, my IT band was just crushed. And I mean, it hurt to walk. And I couldn't run for a couple of weeks. So, and I'm still thinking, like, I'm going to try and run this half marathon. And it just didn't happen. So, fast forward another month or two, and I'm running again, and I'm just not I don't want to go and run something and just like finish it. I actually want to go and attempt something. Like if I'm going to go run a half marathon, like I don't want to go and do a 2.5 hour half marathon.
Yeah.
Like I want to try and put down
Yeah.
a sub 2 hour, hour 30 half marathon.
Right.
And that wasn't going to happen. I wasn't in the shape for that. So that winter, December-ish, a friend of mine at the paper was like, "Hey, there's this group in Pittsburgh called Three Rivers Outdoor Company. They're in Regent Square. They have a run group on Tuesday, a trail running group." And I was like, "Well, I've never really run trails. Like, I wonder what's that about? What that's about." But I had started, so I was like, "Well, I'm not going to go to a group and run trails if I've never been on a trail." So I bought a pair of shoes and started running local trails, and ended up going to this group and meeting a couple of guys. At that point, so now we're into January. I finally ran my longest run to date in January, which was a half marathon, but it was just not a race. It was just like I did 13.1 or 13.5, something like that. And so I go to the run group on Tuesday, and I saw that 2 of the guys that I had met were going to Ohio Pile, and they were going to run the Laurel Highlands hiking trail, and they were doing this 15-mile run. So it's a run that we call Gate to 8. It's You start in Ohio Pile, you run out to mile marker 8, and you run back. And it should be 16 miles. It's really like 15 and a half, depending on your GPS watch. But you start at the gate at the entrance to the Laurel Highlands hiking trail and run that. So I said, "Hey, if you are going to go, like, here's my number. I want to run with you guys." And I'd grown up in the area. I grew up in Donegal near Second Springs, and I'd spent a lot of time at Ohio Pile, but I'd never really been on the hiking trail. I had hiked the whole 2 miles in from the parking lot to the overnight campsites and stayed in the lean-tos, but I hadn't really ever spent a lot of time on the trail beyond going a mile or 2 either direction. So I one weekend I ran a half marathon. The following weekend he was like, "Well, we're we're going to do like a marathon or something. And I'm like, why don't we just do like 15 or 18? Well, we went past 8, and I think we went to mile 11.
Okay.
So now it's a 22-mile run, 20-mile run, whatever it is, depending on the watch. So I went from 13 to 20, whatever. And then the following weekend did a half marathon.
Okay.
And the weekend after that, or the following weekend did a marathon, ran 26. Was it? No, it might have been 13 to 26 to 30.
Okay.
So in a matter of 3 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks, I went from running a half marathon, 13.1, to a 50K, which is 30.1 miles. 31 miles. So, it was an experience. And now I'm training for a 70 just because why not? So it all started because a buddy was like, well, if you can run a half marathon, like you can run a marathon. If you're going to train for a marathon, why don't you just train for the Laurel 70? Like, and, as a non-runner okay, I trust you, not remembering that, my buddy Darren holds the world record for open water swimming as the first person and only person to do the Ocean 7 swims, which are the 7 hardest open water swims in the world.
Okay.
He's the only person to complete them on their first attempt.
Got it.
On all 7 swims, and he's the youngest person to complete them on all 7 swims.
Wow.
So, and he's a David Goggins follower. So I'm like, well, sure, yeah, I can do this, not having any idea what any of this entails. So the race was supposed to be in June of this year. COVID canceled that. It moved to September, and I had a wedding that weekend, and so I didn't get to run it. So we're now retraining to run it next year. So
has COVID in general still put a stop on races? Is it, I guess, close proximity?
Yeah, so not everywhere. Pennsylvania,
I would
it
think
did.
so.
Pennsylvania, it took until September for them to allow races to happen.
Okay.
And now they are limiting, like the DCNR limited how many aid stations you could have, how many people at aid stations, how you were allowed to have food set up at aid stations.
Yeah.
So I would have liked to have run it this year. I had a wedding that was more important to go photograph.
Right.
But it was also like when they postponed it and then they weren't announcing the date, mentally I just was like, well, I'm not going to keep on pushing it if I don't even know if I can make it.
Got it.
So I had called up the race directors and I was like, hey, like I've got a wedding scheduled for this day, but
right.
You guys haven't released a date. And they're like, well, we don't know yet. The state still hasn't given us an official day yet. So I just was like, well, I'm not gonna be able to make this.
Yeah.
So I had to defer it this year, and we're gonna run it in 2021, which will be interesting. So it'll be like right around 2 years from when I first started running.
It's crazy.
That I'm gonna go to 70.
It's crazy.
If we have a nice winter, hopefully I'll get there first. I'd like to mentally get over at least 50 miles before trying to run 70 during a race. But yeah, it's fun. I mean, this was a great year for.
Oh, it sounds like fun
for running. I mean, it's like. We've done 50Ks where like halfway through we stop and we drink a beer and eat some food and then go back out on the trail. So
trail running. So to those who don't run or are not familiar with the term, that's literally running like a wooded trail, right? Yeah. So obviously the maneuvering that you have to do is completely different than running. The
technicality of it is significantly harder than running.
I would think.
The injury to the body, I think, is significantly lower than road running.
Why?
You're not impacting on cement, and you're not running at the level that I'm running at. You're not running nearly as fast. So for me, my fastest mile to date is like a 6:15, and that's not sustainable for me. I can run 8:30s all day long. I'm working my way to a sub 21 5K, but on the trail, my average pace is like 12.5-minute miles.
Okay.
You're not. At the level that I'm at, I'm not racing up hills.
Okay.
I'm hiking up hills as fast as I can, and I'll pick up and I'll run a little bit here and there. But when you're getting into a long run like that, it's really about finding a pace and maintaining that pace and not pushing yourself out. Anybody can go out there and push it really hard for 5 minutes,
right, and
run a mile. Everybody's hardest is different, but you can go out there and you can put yourself into a max effort for a mile. Some people can go out there and put themselves into a max effort for a marathon. We saw this was the year that they broke the sub 2 hour marathon with Kipchoge.
Right.
Which is insane.
Right. It is insane.
Is it an official marathon sub 2? It's not. It's not during a race. It was during an event for Nike. But to be able to see somebody come in at a sub 2, which is a sustained pace faster than I've ever run in my life. That's a sustained 4:35, I think, something like that. I mean, it's insane. I can't run that for 500 yards.
Got it.
And that's his pace. That's wild. So I feel like I'm at the age now where trail running is actually a wiser run than running on a road race. The idea of running the Pittsburgh Marathon just sounds painful.
You think of a trail, the topography with it's uneven.
Oh yeah,
There's
it's rocks and roots. And Pennsylvania is not exactly Western buff trails. We're not running on these really nice single track mountain bike trails or Western running trails where it's smooth and raked out. I mean, we're in the Appalachian Mountains. It is. There's three things you look out for.
To me, that sounds more dangerous.
I mean, it's
ankle injuries.
It certainly
stumbling,
can be. But it's
things
not
like that.
Your risk is to your ankles. Ankles heal faster than knees.
Okay.
You're not. That impact isn't. Our bodies aren't meant to run on concrete. Concrete doesn't give.
Got it.
But we were created to run in the woods, to run on ground,
sand or whatever.
And so, the impact on that is. For me, I mean, I run most of my runs in the mornings on the road because it's what I have out my front door. I don't want to go and drive to go running on a regular basis for a 5-mile run.
Got it.
So most of my runs are still on the road, but I noticed that the injury is significantly higher. The rate of injury is more likely on the road because you push yourself, because you're trying to go faster, because you can go faster. But then on top of that, even running in highly cushioned shoes, you're still landing on ground that doesn't give. Trails, because you have rocks and roots, you have to pick your feet up. You have to pay attention. So you don't zone out the same way.
Got it.
And you can certainly stumble and fall. I mean, it happens.
Yeah.
So you've got rocks and roots, which are your two biggest issues, and then rattlesnakes, which are, to me, the biggest issue of all because I'm terrified of snakes.
No doubt.
And this was a nice, dry, warm year where there were a lot of snakes on the trails.
So you saw it.
We saw a lot of snakes this summer.
They don't scurry away? I mean,
sometimes it takes poking them with big sticks and then chucking rocks at them to get them to move.
Really?
Yeah, and they're kind of the big guy in the trail.
And no doubt. No doubt.
Yeah, we had a couple of big rattlesnakes where we couldn't get around them. They're right in the middle of the trail. And they didn't want to move. Fortunately, there were hikers in front of us. We were like, guys, there's a snake. And we were like,
I don't want any parts of
we're
that.
going to slow down and just let it. Yeah, we'll just let him. So after a few minutes of him not moving, we're getting impatient. So the one guy starts to poke him with a stick.
Yeah. Great.
And the guy, the snake was obviously not aggressive because he didn't come at us. He just stayed coiled. And when we poked him and tried to move him along, he finally started to move, but still rattling and letting us know he's there. And then a couple of rocks right towards his butt, and he finally scurried off.
Wow.
The reality was he was going to win the standoff.
Of course.
Unless we tried to move him.
He's a snake.
Yeah, but it's no, being in the woods there, I've realized like trail running, there's a place where when you're doing these long runs, and they are long. I mean, the average run for me on the trails, if I'm doing a gate to 8, it's not fast. It's between 3 and 4 hours.
Okay.
For 15 miles. On the road, that's exceptionally slow. But on the trail, you've got 1,000-foot climb at mile 6 to 8. It's like 1,500 feet between those 2 miles. The first 1,000 feet come in about a mile.
Okay.
It's a very steep gain for Pennsylvania. So you're hiking that. Well, that adds in a lot of time.
Right.
You're running 6,000 feet in those 15 miles. I think it's 5,200 feet in those 15 miles. So it's a slower run. But you also have that time just to zone out. So, all that stuff that you go out and you run, you're thinking about for your first, hour, starts to just become nonsensical conversations afterwards because you hit that point where like, okay, I've got through the deep stuff. For me, it's usually like the deep stuff in my mind is like worked out in the first hour. And the next few hours are just spent like thinking about nothing or having dumb guy conversations that are, totally nonsensical. Sometimes every once in a while it takes 3 hours for you to get into those really deep conversations.
Yeah.
where you've gone into like, okay, I'm tired, this is dumb, and then somebody drops a bomb and you're like, whoa,
Got it.
we gotta talk about that. But yeah, it's just there's a piece to being out in nature. You're not,
No doubt.
you don't have the busyness around you. You know, you block off a few hours and you're just like, I'm gone. I'm disconnected. And at times you don't have any cell service, so you really are just kind of out there doing your own thing.
You take phone calls while you're running?
No, unless
People
it's my
do.
wife.
Yeah.
Then if it's my wife, in the morning, I'll take the call because it usually means like, hey, I've got to get on a call, so get back here. If it's on the trail, if it's not my wife, I'm not taking the call.
Right on. Yeah, I see people talking on their phone while
Yeah.
they're jogging. I'm just like, it's just crazy.
No, I don't know how people do that. I mean,
Smoking cigarettes while they're jogging.
Yeah.
I've seen that too.
well, that was the other thing. So I had been smoking a lot of cigars when I started running.
Okay.
And I
Before you started running.
Yeah, so I'd quit smoking years before, but then my daughter was born, and I was smoking cigars at work and just as a way to relax. But I was finding it becoming habit forming.
Right.
And I'd moved from like little cigars to like cigarillos, and which are basically an unfiltered cigarette with
Right.
but they look like a cigar, and so there was that recognition that like I'm creating something that's habit forming and I need to get away from that.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize how bad it was until like I started running. Like it put a lot of, even though it's a cigar, there's a lot of filtration that takes place that your body is doing. And it took a long time to clear that out to be able to like build my lung capacity up. I mean, my lung capacity still isn't where I think it should be.
Huh.
Part of that is being 38 or almost 38 and having had asthma when I was younger already put me at risk of lung issues, and then smoking on top of that, and then the cigars on top of that. So yeah, it's just been like a year and a half of like reflection and restoration, and then this year being COVID, that you realize what's really important in life. It's when all of a sudden you can't go wherever you want to, you can't do what you want to,
Right.
You don't have the freedom to just hang out with friends the way that you used to. You go to an event and you're like, wait, there's even outside like the mental perspective of like, I don't think COVID was as bad as it was played off to be. I don't think we should have killed an economy for it.
Right.
I think we should have protected those that needed protecting.
Which I don't think it was handled right. That's all.
But we didn't handle it. We as a society and we as a media nation didn't handle it right. It all became about fear. And so that...
No, it still is.
And it, to somebody who doesn't live in that zone of fear very well, it still takes a toll. And so you still go to an event and you're like, man, there were 100 people there. Well, we were outside. And we all had we weren't all hanging out around a dinner table with 100 people or sitting in a conference room, but we were at a polo match or we were at a run or whatever. It begins to build on this, to like wear down the psyche of like, is this safe? Am I being healthy? And then, so I think that's been the hardest part about it, is like, it's been the best years that we've had because you get to spend time as a family. But psychologically, I think it's been a hard year where it's just like, if so-and-so goes to visit somebody, that's one more person who could end up getting somebody sick because you don't know what people outside of your circle are doing. And the last thing that I want to do is, I'm not worried about myself or my wife or daughter, but I'm worried about our parents.
Right.
And so the last thing I want to do is, put my parents at risk or my in-laws at risk because we weren't as careful. So, and I think that's what a lot of the structure has been around. So yeah, it's been a good year. It's been, got to run, actually ran less this year than last summer, or less in 2019 than last year, in the later half of it, just because things start to get busy again. And I've got my daughter 5 days a week, so you can't just escape as easily.
Yep.
And then on top of that, my wife working from home, I'm with my daughter, my wife's working really hard. I can't just say like, hey, you're on and not give her a break.
She probably wouldn't appreciate that.
No, it's been a year of working really hard to find balance beyond just the basics.
And that's the word I think most people are confronted with COVID is balance. And balance is something that a lot of people just take for granted.
Yeah.
It's part of a routine.
And it's something that we actually, balance was actually the imbalance. Mm-hmm. We didn't really live a balanced life.
Yeah.
I mean, people just
I don't think most people do.
go, and you never stop to reflect. Well, when you're stuck at home together, now you're not go. You're always on with each other, and you don't have that separation to just find the balance within yourselves.
No doubt.
So the running was necessary, but just the time outside was,
I relate.
I think that, more than anything, we saw more people in the woods than I've ever seen before.
I can relate.
People just who never liked the outdoors were outdoors. And based off of that, I'm guessing that you were one of them. Like, I remember a conversation we had years and years ago. You're like, man, I don't care about the fields, like concrete it all and build it up. But I am guessing
I've changed,
that has changed drastically.
Yeah, that's
well.
true. Yeah. The capitalistic dog in me for a lot of years just really. My story was just woods. I was pushed into the woods with scouts and all that stuff. When I was a kid, I just had my fill. And once I became a businessman, I just really loved entrepreneurship and all that stuff, and just loved to see progress. So the woods didn't play a big part of my life until like the last couple of years, and just being able to get out and breathe, and just spending time alone once in a while. The last year or so, just spending a lot of time. My big thing's walking. I'll do 90 minutes a night. 90 minutes to 2 hours a night of fast, brisk walking, like almost 4 miles an hour walking.
It's awesome.
Yeah, it's been amazing. For the benefits, beyond the weight and all this stuff, it's just psychologically, it's been amazing. Yeah. It's been a good way to get, good way to get through all this stuff. I want to talk to you about the psychological part about, because I think that might be the thing that is going to be the long-term lasting effect of COVID, beyond the sadness of the deaths, of course. But those of us who make it through, I think the psychological effects can be devastating, not only during COVID, but what's coming ahead.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I've shut off most of the media in my life.
Yeah.
I've turned off, if I didn't have to be on Facebook for,
it's a wise move.
For the one, I'm on Facebook for a mastermind. We do most of our talking in there.
Mm-hmm.
And
in the Facebook group, I'm guessing, right?
Yes. So most of our conversations are through this Facebook group.
Right.
If it wasn't for that, and for trying to run a photography business, I wouldn't be on it. I think that it's been the most negative impact on our society over the past 24 months has been really over the past let's say 8 years. Like, social media has been one of the most negative impacts on my life personally.
Really?
And I think that it's probably been, to a large part, societal, that I've seen in the past 8 years.
You were the first person that introduced me to Twitter when you and I were working together for that period of time in the late 2000s. I remember you walked into my office, you said, "Hey, you guys see this Twitter thing?" Because I was trying to figure out MySpace.
Yeah.
Look at this Twitter thing. It's like you can in 140 characters, you can just spit out to the world your random thoughts. And as a business person selling a product online, I didn't see the value of it. I'm like, well, I can't explain the guitar. I can't extrapolate.
Sure.
This is of no value. And I'm thinking
Instagram would have been amazing for you back then.
It would have been. Yeah. But it's like, I'm thinking, the Twitter thing's never going to amount to anything. And then you look 10 years later, it's the fucking Wild West, and probably to me, still the biggest cancer on social media is Twitter. It's just so volatile and so.
I don't know if it's just Twitter though. I think that I think Facebook has become.
It has
awful.
been.
I mean,
it has been.
There is this. So what I've had to do is, I've gone through, and I've watched friends on both sides of the aisle just get filled with
it's horrible.
And I've just started putting them in timeouts. Like, I'm shutting you off for 30 days. I'm not going to listen to this. It's not because it's not because you're challenging my perspective. It's because you're just being rude.
Yeah.
And
there's a lot of that.
I don't need that. What I need right now is I need to be around people who I care about.
Right.
And I can disagree with you, and it doesn't mean I don't like you. In fact, I disagree with most of my friends on both political sides, but I don't dislike them.
Yeah.
I have a difference of opinion because I find myself fairly moderate. I like to see business. I think that business is good. I also think that we have a need for regulation at times.
No question.
Do I like regulation from a federal government? Not really. Do I think that deregulating and just being the Wild West is the way? I don't. I think that when we need to have social contracts, and I think that we've seen a breakdown in social contracts. We now have conversations where I yell at you because you disagree with me, and I don't, and then we don't speak to each other again. Now I really don't like you. Instead of just having a difference of opinions, if we can't have a conversation and have a difference of opinions, then we're not friends. And more importantly than that, then we're breaking our own social contracts to say, I don't agree, I'll have a conversation with you, but I'm going to respect it. And I may look at it and say, that's not a healthy perspective. Or I'm not saying go out there and say Antifa and Nazism is a good thing.
Right.
I think the idea of anti-fascism and anti-Nazism are good. I don't think that people who are being called Nazis are Nazis. And I don't think that people that are being called rioters at times are rioters. I think that we've had a breakdown in our social contracts together where it starts with, who am I willing to talk to? And how am I willing to have that conversation? You know, my parents and I had conversations this summer that weren't polite. And I had to look at it and say, but I love you guys and I respect you and I may disagree with you, but I have to respect your opinion. I may try to say I don't agree with it, but if I'm rude about it, if I say that your opinion defines you, then I'm only looking at a small thing.
That's right.
And I have to look at somebody as a whole. That's
right.
To tell them, to be able to see their heart. I can't look at one statement.
See, I think this is elemental stuff, though. What boggles my mind is what you're saying is so true, and it's not happening now on a whole. But this is stuff we learned as a young person, as a child. You learn to rationalize. You learn to look at people and evaluate people based upon more than one thing. Yeah. But it's become we've been so quick in the last decade or so to just label and move on. Yeah, label them, move on.
You know, we in society will look and say, well, you know, what we've done verbally is the same thing as the guy who gets into a street fight, goes home and gets a gun and shoots somebody. Mm-hmm. We now do that verbally with each other. We go down and we try to destroy somebody because we disagreed with them or because we lost an argument. And then we go out there and we say the harshest, cruelest things that we can and try and break them down. There, you know, when you were growing up, when I was growing up, you got into a schoolyard fight and 9 times out of 10, you were friends afterwards. Mm-hmm. You know, I still remember being 18 years old and getting a bottle and a brick over my head, knowing who it was, having a concussion. This is all over a game of beer pong that I didn't even play. But a buddy that a guy that I had grown up with was, we'll just say, out of his mind. And there had been a game of beer pong previously, and he hit me with a brick in the back of the head. And I knew who it was because I turned around and I said his name, and I remember grabbing him by the throat and taking him to the ground and then letting him go. And I went, you know, the fight broke up. There were no fists. There were no, like, let's stand up and go to a fight. But it was, you know, another friend, she's yelling something. I'm in the middle of it, and I get the smack in the back of the head. And I get up, and I'm like, F you, and I say his name. And I'm like, was that you? And he's like, yeah. And I grab him, and I put him on the ground, and we let it go.
Yeah.
And I go home, and we were, you know, my mom was like, we're calling the cops. And so we call the cops, and I see him a day later, and he was like, why are you talking to me? He was like, you called the cops on me. I was like, dude, you hit me with a brick. But we can shake hands right now and just and let it be done. Like, I won't press charges.
Right.
And we're just gonna let it go. You know, it was not a good time in my life either, so I'm sure I was spouting off as well, but we let it go, and we've been civil ever since.
Yeah.
You know, we've been friendly at times. Like, it was a party fight that didn't need to go any further than the party.
Right.
But in today's society, that would happen. And whether that happens in a Facebook comment or at a protest. Now it's I'm going to get my gun and I'm going to shoot you down, and I'm going to hunt you down.
Yeah.
And we do that on social media, and we've seen that a lot over the past really 8 years. We've seen it, and you could go back 12. I mean, people who said Obama wasn't their president are the same ones who saying Trump was their president. And then telling everybody else who didn't vote for Trump that he is your president, even though you said Obama wasn't yours.
Right.
We've gone to the point where our social conversations are now no longer conversations. It's I don't like you. I want to hurt you. I want to see you hurt. And that's not healthy. So I've shut off social media. I've shut off 90% of the news. We don't have cable. I haven't watched a news report on TV in almost a year.
Yeah,
I just have no desire to, and I see enough of it. And I found myself during COVID and during the protests and the riots of the summer starting to fall into that, like calling people out on things. And I was just like, it's not healthy.
It's unhealthy for you.
It's unhealthy for me, but it's also unhealthy for everybody who's seeing me do it.
Right.
Because it feeds into one side or the other.
No doubt. I think too, there's so many areas to go here. The social media phenomenon to me is that we as people will act in the comfort and the anonymity, or the somewhat anonymity at times of the computer. We will act in a way that we would never do in real life, and this has created a warrior mentality, but it's not real. You see,
it's the trolls online, and it's the it's the warrior mentality of the guy living in his mom's basement with a pack of Twinkies and a 6-pack, who is going to go to war with his ARs.
Yeah, and there's people who are there, but I just think in general, like, it's just too easy to respond to someone in a negative way because they're not standing in front of you. See, if you wouldn't act that way in person,
and if you did, you'd probably get yourself smacked.
That's why you wouldn't.
Like you call a woman the C word, and if the guy around her is a guy and actually a man, he's going to smack you for it.
Right.
And yet it's okay to be derogatory towards people. We don't have to agree with somebody to like them. We don't have to like somebody
because that virtual world now has currency. It's that virtual world is now it's a real world to a lot of people because they spend most of their time there as opposed to physically in front of other people.
It's more real right now than anything else. And for a lot of folks, but
it's not real.
No. You're absolutely right. I mean, but
that's
it's
the thing
place
we
where
forget,
they are.
though.
But it's the only place where they have a voice. It's the only place where they're connected. And the long-term psychological effects of this. I mean, my daughter told me a few weeks ago. We're sitting in there, and we had gotten into an argument, and she had really gotten fired up and started screaming at me. And I said, Hadley, we really need to work on this. Like, you're not allowed to yell at Daddy this way. And she's sitting in the back of the car, and she goes, Daddy, I'm really sorry. And this is like an hour or two later. She said, I'm really sorry I yelled at you. I just really miss my friends, and I get angry that I can't be around them. And I was like, man, that's deep for a 4-year-old. But a 4-year-old should never have to have the conversation. A 4-year-old should never have to have the conversation about, like, we have to wear a mask because we don't want to kill anybody. Well, Daddy, why are people dying? Like, those aren't conversations that 4-year-olds should have to live with.
Right.
That isolation is where the long-term effects are going to be. If people are so afraid to leave their homes that they're no longer connected with somebody personally, they're not having that coffee with a friend. Even if you go out and go for a walk with a mask on with each other.
Yep.
If you're not getting out of your house, and those who are unhealthy are going to be far more unhealthy at the end of this. And there are those who were seemingly healthy who you're going to see having massive breakdowns. And I think for children, the long-term effects of this are going to be, we're going to have to actively work as adults to help our kids come out of this and realize that you're still allowed to play. You're still allowed to be a kid. We were really careful to keep our daughter outside with friends. But at some point we have to say, like, guys, I'm willing to take a risk of getting sick if you are, because our kids need this.
Yeah, no doubt.
So I'm really worried about what the long-term psychological effects are. I mean, in Japan, they say that more people have died from suicide than COVID. I'm not sure that's true. I don't think that everybody's reporting things.
And Japan in general has a higher suicide rate, don't they?
They do.
And
it spikes significantly.
There's something odd in their culture, I think.
Yeah, and it spikes, from what I was reading, it spikes significantly during this, even above normal, which was already, on a worldwide scale, high per capita. But I think that there is a long-term effect of hurt and isolation and pain because of this. That, again, I can't tell people what to do, and I can't say that somebody's life isn't worth it, but because I really think that we have to protect the vulnerable. But we're only looking at vulnerability one way right now. We're only looking at a vulnerability as being the health of somebody, the physical health of somebody.
Or the more identifiable physical health.
Yeah, a friend's father just passed away, and they're going to call it COVID. The guy had 2 prosthetics from diabetes and didn't take care of himself. Is that COVID?
Right.
It may have been the final nail in the coffin, but there were 99 nails before that. There's no doubt that there are families who are suffering because of this. My cousin is a chaplain at a hospital in New York, and what she has seen is terrifying. New York was in awful condition in the spring, and there's a possibility they go back to that. But her reality isn't the reality of rural Pennsylvania.
Right.
And rural Pennsylvania can never understand that her reality is different than theirs, because we don't have those conversations across regions anymore. We're not, because of this, people aren't seeing things that they would have seen. They're only seeing their bubble. The mental health of social media, their bubble is their bubble. Facebook, if you believe a certain way, the algorithm is only showing you that. It's not showing you differing opinions. I mean, I noticed that throughout the year with things that I would like, and I was agreeing with people on both sides.
Yeah.
But based off of what my profile said, registered Republican, I saw far more far right stuff than I did far left stuff. And then even though I was agreeing with friend statements during the Black Lives Movement protests and Black Lives Matter protests and during the George Floyd protests, like, I still saw less. It began to, I still saw less of that and more of the anger. That's not healthy for us. We can't live in a society where my views are my bubble and everything else doesn't matter.
Well, people do that because they find it comforting, right? They find my views are right. I like to know that I'm right. You want reaffirmation.
Yeah, the reality is like, we're supposed to be an enlightened society, but we don't read. We're supposed to be an enlightened society, but the only enlightenment that we gain is to further a view.
We're always looking for reaffirmation. That is the biggest thing to me. Like, I don't understand why we are afraid to be challenged mentally.
I want to be uncomfortable.
Right, on our beliefs, on our thought processes, on what our friends, our perceived friends, whatever. Yeah. We're just afraid to be challenged, and thus we end up living in an echo chamber.
Yeah, I want my views challenged. Part of that's the journalist in me, and to the defense of my friends who are conservatives, I have moved further left in my years as a journalist.
Right.
Whenever you are surrounded by a thought, you pick that up.
No doubt.
But my years as a journalist at the Trib was never considered a liberal newspaper. It has become the more liberal editorial newspaper. But when you see things firsthand, whether it's seeing things firsthand locally or my years in Rwanda and Central America, wherever you are, when it's not the view that you were brought up with, when you see the world beyond where you are, it challenges you. And if it doesn't challenge you and it doesn't make you think, then you're not challenging yourself. You're just closing in on yourself. I want to understand why things happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to be challenged on my thought process. You know, I don't want to just say, I'm a Republican, I believe this, or I'm a Democrat and I believe this. I want to have a conversation that says, well, my view may be very different because I've never lived this in life. You know, I've never been pulled over because of my color.
Mm-hmm.
I've never dealt with an abortion because I'm a man. I've never dealt with rape. At the same time, somebody who's never watched their family lose a house because their job was shut down because of the environment
Mm-hmm.
isn't going to understand how somebody could be pro-business to the point of damn the environment. When you watch industry leaving, and you can't change with it fast enough because there's not enough economic opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at towns around western Pennsylvania, up and down the Mon and the Ohio and the Allegheny, where since the 70s we've seen a reduction in industry, somebody else is never going to be able to understand why people are so willing to fight for something that long-term environmentally isn't the best thing in the world.
Right.
Or why they'll fight for the right of a mine to be in a place where there's a beautiful fishing stream, even though it could destroy a fishery.
Mm-hmm.
or a wild fish hatchery.
Everybody's reality is different.
Yeah, and so being able to step across that and say, listen, I can see both sides of that, but because I can see both sides of that, I've informed an opinion that is actually sympathetic to both sides.
Mm-hmm.
How I may vote may be different, but I'm sympathetic to both sides. There are things that we should not be sympathetic towards. Hatred and racism we should not be sympathetic towards.
Right.
The forced down your throat belief structure of this is how it is should not be sympathized with. I don't think that when the left screams about this is what it has to be, I don't have to sympathize with that. And when the right screams about this is how it has to be, I don't sympathize with that. I'm not going to judge a person because of one statement they made, but by a number of statements they make.
Certainly, because that's how they're forming their character.
If you can't look at the past 4 years and say that Donald Trump has done good things, then you're only looking through it through a lens of, I don't like what he said.
Mm-hmm.
I sure don't like what the guy said. But there's a reality that we had a really strong economy. That you can't just say, well, the economy was on an upswing at the end of Obama's terms. No, we made policy that improved that improved the economy. We saw unemployment at record lows. I just wish the guy didn't have a voice. Wish there wasn't a mouth that could speak. But to be able to just put it into a bubble and saying this person's been the worst person for this country ever doesn't acknowledge good and bad.
Mm-hmm. That's society in general, though.
Yeah, I mean, and the same people, Obama was divisive too. I mean, Obama was he used a much more eloquent rhetoric that was divisive. Mm-hmm. Clinton with hanging on to your Bibles and guns. Well, why shouldn't we hang on to our Bibles and guns? We shouldn't be hanging on to a Confederate flag, but why shouldn't we hang on to Bibles and guns? Because a Bible to a believer is a moral authority. Now, if we're looking at that and just hanging on to it because we only want to pick out a few verses, there's an issue. Yeah. But if we're looking at it and saying, man, my moral code needs to be conducted this way, and I believe this, but I also recognize that I'm not good, I'm only saved through grace as well. And gosh, I hope that there's enough grace to cover me because I screw up on a regular basis. If we want to, why should we be offended by that? I don't see what was so offensive about that. In fact, if anything, it should say, am I putting certain things above other people? Am I putting what I want above the good of somebody else? Mm-hmm. We are neighbors, and like it or not, my neighbor voted a different way than I did. Mm-hmm. doesn't make them not my neighbor. It doesn't make them any less a part of
But
the
again,
people around
isn't this just civility? And I'll go back to my original point.
Yeah.
We learned this stuff as a young person.
We also didn't have social media when we were young.
Right. Correct.
So we couldn't
Correct.
go out and just you could only do that in very fringe circles where you could just go out there and have fiery rhetoric of a certain nature.
Yeah. We used to laugh at those people.
And
You know,
you
If they
could go out there and publish a manifesto.
and you get laughed at.
Yeah.
But now, why is there credence now when these kind of extreme viewpoints have a bigger platform now
They do.
than they ever did?
Yeah. Unhealthily.
I don't get it.
Yeah.
It's we are looking at people and making value judgments of them, and it goes back to that. The reason why I was attracted to long form conversation, because I think there's a thirst for it, because we live in a world of sound bites.
Yeah.
Everything is a sound bite, and we're not doing anything groundbreaking here, but watching Rogan and Corolla and those folks sitting down with people for long conversation and then seeing it be successful.
Yeah.
Prove that maybe hopefully there's a thirst for people that really want more of the conversation and more reality,
Sure.
more real than just go. I understand there's an expediency with the way we communicate, Dan. I get it, and we have to do that to function in life.
Sure.
But do we?
Well, and do we have to editorialize everything? Can we just have a conversation that says, listen, I don't know what's going to happen at the end of the day. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow.
Right.
We have an inability to have conversations with each other as individuals, but then we put on pedestals those who have a public persona. So we filter everything through our Fox, CNN, MSNBC news, where it's no longer news, it's 24 hours of opinion, an op-ed. Very rarely is there actual breaking news. This is what just happened. Here's what they're saying from the scene.
I think it's just entertainment.
It's always,
just TV.
let's go find people that are going to further our opinion. As a journalist, one of the things that we had to do was we had to tell a story. And fair and balanced doesn't always mean getting both sides of the story.
Right.
Sometimes it means they won't talk to us, but I'm not going to just go, I'm going to try and find some kind of evidence to back something up.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody says the earth is flat, as a journalist, my job is to say, prove it to me. And then go and find a dissenting opinion that can be backed by the facts.
Mm-hmm.
If we can back something factually, and the fact checkers can find that it's factual, then that's good. But we, in our 24-hour news cycle, are, and I'm not saying this about local news. I really don't think this is local news. I think that local news still tells the stories about neighbors. And they may cover things that people don't like because it doesn't fit their political opinion
Right.
or their view of things. But I truly believe newspapers should not be in the business of op-ed. If there was one place that a newspaper should or a local TV station should cut out of their budget, it is the editorial
Editorials.
sections.
Right.
We don't need that. I really don't think we even need to publish letters to the editor.
Why?
for
Yeah.
people.
Why did that even become why was that ever necessary?
It was the way for influence.
I guess.
And I think that those
Just
are the,
created a label though for the publication.
It did. And then now you see the Post-Gazette going through their issues where they're actually not allowing journalists to cover stories because of something they say. But then they go out and they publish backed editorials
Right.
that are of a very different opinion.
Right.
So I think that editorial, if we want to come back to society, we have to get rid of editorial content, of opinion content, by being editorial. And we have to go back to facts because we've lost any sense of direction that way. We listen to what we want to listen to.
Mm-hmm.
And if we are listening to something that is absolutely telling a falsehood, we get more of that and it inundates us. And then we find that content And it's not like you have to go into these dark back room alleys to find this stuff, or like you have to go to these crazy rallies to find this stuff. You don't have to go and sit in with the Chicago 7 or the KKK to be a part of these groups anymore. You just go onto Facebook, go onto Twitter, find a couple of voices that you like and amplify it. Now, you don't even have to be a human. You can create a bot who just starts putting out content. And there's nothing fact-checked behind it. There's no... It's freedom of speech. Well,
that's scary.
But is it even freedom of speech when it's not a person?
Right.
Does freedom of speech extend to
robots,
to bots, beyond that, to bots from foreign actors? So whether it's Russia trying to sow disinformation, or China, or let's face it, we still live in a world where everyone's trying to gain influence. It could be France, Germany, and England. You know,
could be.
Everybody is trying to sow disinformation to back their opinions and to back the leadership that the nation is saying we want to support.
Are we now intellectually soft in this country?
I think we're at the technological stages of intellectual technology, where we're seeing a deeper growth in places where we never would have.
Like, what do you mean?
Well, I mean, what we're seeing with SpaceX and Tesla, 5G, what we're seeing in streaming of content and availability of content. I think that technologically we're at this place where it's just fascinating. But I think to go back though, I think that we're losing an intellectual desire to go deeper.
I would agree.
And that's where.
So is that laziness, or is that being intellectually soft?
I think that intellectual soft. I mean, I think that it's hard work to go out there and look beyond what's right in front of you. It's hard work to go out there and look.
Is it? Are we that lazy?
I think we are. I think that we're that uncomfortable, having our views challenged anymore.
Yeah.
And we don't have to back anything up.
Is it uncomfortableness, or is it a form of entitlement? Like we feel entitled to feel a certain way, and I'm going to find someone well, I have this theory, and I want your thoughts on it. It's tough to say we, because I'm assuming it's everybody, but there are people in society, through my observations, that tend to become married to their opinions, even after, through the course of life, they are shown multiple times that they're wrong.
They double down on them.
Yes. So even though they know what they've been, now they actually physically and mentally have come to the realization they are wrong. They won't. There's such a lack of humility in society that they will not walk it back, say I was wrong. Say I was wrong, change their ideas or thoughts, and then just move forward. They can't do that simple act.
I think the key word there was humility.
I think so, too.
We are not a humble people.
I think so, too.
We have lost our sense of humility. We have lost the sense of, I'm not the only person that matters.
Good point.
At the same time, though, we see an outpouring of support during a time like COVID as well. So even though we've seen this exceptional division on rhetoric, we've also seen exceptional generosity when government has failed. So food banks, churches that are donating, local organizations that are helping people, organizations paying for people's rent and heating, because we've had a failure at a federal and state level.
Yeah.
Pennsylvania was one of the hardest hit as far as layoffs in the country. We shut down. I don't know anybody well who's passed away. I know a few people have passed away from this, but we've shut down. There are people who are hurt. When people are hurt, they dive into what they know more. They don't look inward. They don't say, well, what about? They double down. But we've also seen this incredible outpour of support of businesses and organizations saying, we're going to step up and help our neighbors. So
the human spirit always
so I don't think
above,
it hasn't
no
all
doubt.
been bad. I mean, I think that it has been bad, but we haven't lost ourselves now to where we're not seeing people rioting for food. But it's also a pretty
Toilet paper.
But that's also a pretty low bar when that's what we're setting the standard as. Like, we are seeing people waiting for hours to get a food distribution.
Yeah.
We're seeing people waiting for hours in newer vehicles. You know, it's not just people who were always on the outskirts who same people who have always been going to food banks.
Right.
There are people who are going to food banks who had good jobs and through no fault of their own have had their lives upturned. And I know people who still haven't gotten unemployment that have been applying since last year. I know people who applied for PPP who barely got enough to cover the loss of 2 weddings, but they lost more than their partner's salary.
Right.
You know, I mean, we lost 40% of our income. You know, it's by Grace and Dave Ramsey and planning that we were able to go through. But if we had been quote unquote normal with car payments and credit card debt and a whole lot of other stressors,
right,
we would have been in a very different situation. We were fortunate that, like, we found, you know, in my 3 hours a day of driving to work and back, I listened to Dave Ramsey and I was like, wait, this whole debt-free thing is kind of crazy. Kel, we got to work on this. Like,
right,
you know, we don't have to go in, you know, rice and beans, but we got to get ourselves prepared so that we do have more freedom.
Well, isn't that ultimately, as we get older, money, the value of money ends up being freedom? I mean, the trinket thing never, you know, you and I have had so many deep conversations, and they're all kind of rushing back to me now. It's very cool. It's been 10 years since I've seen you, roughly. But you said to me one time, you said, we were in the office with guitars everywhere and stuff, but I was driving the old Astro van at the time, and you were kind of a car guy, and we were just talking about cameras and cars and things, and you said to me something like, you really don't like buy much stuff, do you, for yourself? And I said, I don't know, I think I probably have more than I need, but I just didn't find a lot of I never found a lot of satisfaction of spending hard-earned money on things to stare at them. Does that make any sense? Like, I didn't have a guitar collection. Remember, I didn't personally own anything.
No, you had a lot of guitars that you liked to play.
Yeah.
There were things that you had that were like
cameras and things I was interested in.
Yeah, or like I remember some watches. But there was but it wasn't like you had a huge collection of them. You were like, I've wanted one of these for a real long time. And I'm at that point now where I can have that.
Yeah.
But then I remember you being like, you know, it just wasn't as awesome as I thought it was. And, like,
and that even has...
I think you switched out. You were like, I really wanted this Breitling, and you downgraded to a different one because you were like...
Pretty much. That's
it just
my
wasn't
mantra.
worth it.
That's
once
my
you
mantra.
got there.
Yeah, there's never any satisfaction. My point is, that's further extrapolated now, where I just view being comfortable, not with stuff. Now, there's a lot of eclectic things in here, but it's aesthetics. There's nothing of
no, but it's also
craziness.
Memories that are lived. I mean,
and that's what this is.
The Paul Stanley painting, and you know, there is the photos from the concert. I mean, I'm surprised the double truck from the Kiss book isn't in here, opened up. But I mean, but there's accomplishments and memories.
That's what this place is. That's what's important.
Far more valuable. Those experiences and the life lived is far more valuable than, like,
100%.
You know, like, the last thing in the world that I want to do is be that guy who is making $500,000 a year, but I'm sitting on everything, you know, payments.
100%. 100%.
You know, I don't want to have a successful business, quote unquote, and be living in $1 million house and driving a $200,000 car and be paying $10,000 a month for the car.
And I think that there were generations, or there certainly were decades in the past 50 years where, you know,
the 80s.
The
greed is
80s
good.
started. 80s started it for sure. I just don't know if the concept of working to acquire things is still as prevalent as it used to be with people. I figured that out a long time ago because I the Lord blessed me in a way that I thought that way. I wasn't obsessed by stuff. But when I was a younger person, I went through that phase.
I mean, you're seeing a movement now with I think the response to some of the overexposure to social media is kind of the minimalist movements.
Yeah,
where you're
I've
seeing
been diving
people
into those,
and the early retirement. There's a name for it, but the FIRE, was it? The retire early, like whatever FIRE stands for. I'm drawing a blank on it right now, but it's basically work hard, invest, retire early.
Yeah, it really comes down to quality of life, right?
Yeah.
Like what you view your quality of life.
Sure.
To me, doing what I want to do with most of the hours of my day, that's winning the lottery for me.
For sure.
It's not having $100,000 vehicle or $100,000 guitar or having the finest clothes. That stuff it's just lost on me.
Yeah.
If I can stare at it, I used to say never fall in love with an inanimate object.
Yeah.
That's how I've tried to live my life, for better or worse.
Yeah.
People do, though. They love their stuff.
Well, and they'll work hard to have stuff but not ever have it. Like,
good point.
You think about the average household is like $35,000 in debt. The average car payment is $500 a month.
Mm-hmm.
The average person is spending 40% of their income on their housing.
No doubt.
That's crazy.
No doubt about it.
It also puts you in a really hard financial situation to ever save up and retire and not be dependent on a little bit of Social Security.
Mm-hmm. Do we care, though?
Yeah, I guess.
That's the thing. Do we? I'd like to think we do.
I want my daughter to see that, like, okay, we have everything that we need, and we have far more than we need. But we don't have to be chasing the newest things. Like, I don't have to go and buy you the flashiest.
Right.
I want her to have a good life and I want her to appreciate it. I'm never going to be able to afford to just do whatever we want to.
Right.
I'm not going to get to go and say, oh yeah, like, one day I'll get to go on a backcountry ski trip. One day I might get to go hella skiing. I'm not going to get to do that on a regular basis. I'm not going to just get to go and ski my life away or fly fish my life away, or probably not gonna. But in the midst of all that, like, when we met, I'd been to Rwanda, and I've been to Central America, and I've been into India, and all of it through work. I've been in Cameroon. I've gotten to spend a lot of amazing months in places I never would have seen because the money wasn't the important part.
Yeah.
I think not long after we stopped working together, I went to Cameroon.
Yeah.
And Cameroon came out of a conversation. I don't remember where. I think I had brunch with a buddy and a girl that he knew, and another guy showed up, and he was on this board of this football organization, this soccer organization. And he was like, oh, you should talk to Justin. And so this is like the fall. And it was getting cold. I think it might have been the wintertime because I think there had been a snow, and we were like sitting outside in Shadyside on a Saturday morning having cocktails, and the snow was melting. It was like this warm 50-degree day, and he was like, oh, you got to talk to this guy named Justin. And Justin's had started a program called the Cameroon Football Development Program, and they were using soccer to promote leadership and life skills within rural communities in Cameroon. Okay. And so I talked to Justin, and he was like, you got to come to Cameroon with me, man. So we went there and we spent 3 months in Cameroon.
Yeah.
And, didn't make $1. Didn't make any money off of it at all, but I had a 3-month experience where I got to meet this amazing team of girls, this amazing girls soccer team from Montreal, and their coach. And I got to learn from them, and I got to meet some awesome guys in Cameroon, like this guy Biggie, who had this big heart of gold, and we'd lift in the morning together, and Brian, and then spend time with Justin and with the family that we were living with, and create these relationships that we saw in the midst of that I get to have these conversations with people about what's important. You get to spend time watching as people take their time and they give it to help another young man or young woman learn something new that isn't taught. Leadership and life skills, women's rights, HIV protection. Oh, you want to play soccer with us? You got to keep your grades up, or you're not allowed to join the program. mom and dad really want you to play soccer with us, but they also want you to work in the field. Well,
Right.
okay, but mom and dad, in order for him to play soccer, he has to go to school. He's only allowed to miss 1 day a week. And so using these things to say, how do we raise up children? How do we grow another generation? Being in Rwanda in 2001, like, genocide was over in 1994, but where I was in the northern part of Uganda, in Ruangeri, near the Congolese border, the day that I went up and saw silverback gorillas, the Hutu militia attacked a group of UN workers and killed 4 of them.
Wow.
That was the reality around there. So you're talking to, I'm working with the bishop of the Episcopal Diocese in Ruangeri, and they're building an orphanage for children of the genocide. And this is 6 years later, and there's still this massive need, but it's still not there because they're waiting on the government to provide the water and the electricity.
Yeah.
I meet a woman who, her first husband was killed during the genocide, and she's missing part of her skull. And then her second husband was in the Rwandan military, and they were patrolling up around Volcano National Park, and he was killed by Hutu militia just the year before I was there in 2000. And in 2001, there were still attacks. And so you realize, like, the world that I have back home is so safe and secure.
No doubt.
And we still have a government that we may not agree with all the time, but we still have a government where we have order. We have a social contract that says we have order.
Right.
We're not in Nicaragua,
Right.
where, I've spent time working with friends who worked in the garbage dumps, where anybody who runs against Ortega dies.
Mm-hmm.
Or they just disappear.
Right. Right.
So
We're not a banana republic.
no, we still have the opportunity. We still have a vote that matters, and we may not like the outcome of the vote,
Right.
but we still have the right to vote.
Whatever happened to just accepting to me,
Yeah.
elections have consequences. They do. I mean, there's, that's just the nature of, but the 2 years comes up pretty quick.
Yeah.
And then the 4 years comes up real quick.
We're going to see, there's no doubt about it, we're going to see a tide change in this country in 2 years. We're going to see Congress or Senate switch.
It's so predictable.
And it happens. And so, you got 2 years where you might not like what's happening. But if we're also a Republican, we have 3 branches of government that the outcome of this election is different, because we have 3 branches of government that are controlled by a party. But we also had that at the beginning of 2016.
We
And
did.
so we always have a government that we may not like the leadership at the top, but it's balanced. It's meant to be.
Well,
We will see.
the middle always wins, right? I mean, that's why you don't see, generally speaking, you just don't see extreme bills on either side really ever kind of make it through, because the pressure's put on those marginal or moderate Congress folks.
And you have to get, I think where we've seen more of that is in the past 8 years. We saw it under Obama.
Mm-hmm.
The reason that the filibuster's gone is because they got rid of the filibuster and went to simple majority.
Right.
I think that was a mistake.
Right.
And then the Republicans over the past 4 years have used that very strategically.
Mm-hmm.
They should have reintroduced the filibuster. They should have said we were going to reintroduce the filibuster.
Yep.
But they haven't. But we're not. What rhetoric can do over time, and what that isolation can do over time, is allow a Rwanda to happen.
Yeah.
Rwanda wasn't a vacuum.
Yeah.
There were months leading up to Rwanda where on public radio, Hutu militants talking about the cockroach Tutsis.
Wow.
And we're going to wipe them out.
Wow.
And it wasn't in some vacuum. It became the norm.
Yeah.
And then people stood by and let it happen.
Yeah. And we cannot permit that in this country.
And I don't think it would happen here. I mean, that would be essentially like saying, hey, all the Irish suck. Mm-hmm. Let's go kill them all. But if we don't move outside of our bubbles,
mm-hmm.
then we can begin to see other people as other rather than just as people.
See, I want to believe in my heart that, throwing crazy numbers out there, that 99.9% of all Americans, there's a good crust in there. There's good folks in there. It's just the extremes have such a loud platform now that seems to wash over I'm not just talking social media. I'm talking about the major networks.
For sure.
The networks, not the news portion, but the actual networks have taken their news divisions and created entertainment, and that's a problem. That started
WWE, WWF.
That started decades ago with Inside Edition and 60 Minutes in the 70s. That was the start of it, where it became entertainment. When the news story, we're going to run with this, and we're going to throw a little Hollywood glitz in there.
Yeah.
And now that's kind of what you get right now when you turn CNN or Fox on right now.
Sure.
There's a Hollywood glitz to everything. The breaking news, like boom. I mean, you don't need all that. That's
I don't turn it on.
That's editorializing. It isn't always spoken words. It's the look and feel behind it all.
Oh, it's the music behind it. It's
Absolutely.
It's the grittiness of it. It's the how do they show a flag waving and how do they show something else? I mean, it is all opinion.
It's a narrative,
and it's dangerous. You know, we've seen that happen over the past couple of decades. You know, we saw ISIS form in a bubble.
Yeah.
We saw Kosovo.
Yeah.
We saw Rwanda.
Right.
We've just witnessed Rohingyas being decimated. We have watched Sudanese massacres.
Yeah, no doubt.
It happens
No doubt.
all the time. And we live in a bubble where we don't think it could happen here.
Yeah.
And yet when the rhetoric becomes that way, that is what happens.
Right.
I'm not going to compare us to Nazi Germany. I don't think we're there.
No,
I
don't either.
But we can't say that doesn't happen anymore, because it happens. You know, it happened to Rwanda in 91. It happened in Kosovo in 97, 98 ish.
98, I think.
It's still happening in Sudan.
Yeah.
You know, we see it happening. We saw a war between Cameroon and Nigeria over a border, and then we see civil war within Cameroon. You know, we're seeing the Taliban attacking universities. This stuff happens when we allow minority voices to become majority heard. So to think that it's not going to happen, or that it couldn't happen, I think is naive. I
hope we have enough mechanisms in place, and the history of the way we have, which is not a long history. It's only a couple hundred years.
Yeah.
But I think the weight of the structure of the government, there's enough. I would hope there's enough checks in there, and there's just a checks and balances in the way it's structured, that a dictator couldn't rise.
Yeah.
You know, people were worried about Trump being a dictator, which I thought was the silliest thing in the world. No. You know, the rhetoric's kind of ridiculous at times from him, but I think the mechanism in the government's strong enough.
Sure. Well, and it has to be, because we have to be. We as individuals have to be strong enough to say that we're not going to allow that. We still have to be neighbors, and I think that's the most important thing, is we still have to look and say, do I really trust my neighbor?
Yeah.
I don't have to trust the federal government, but do I trust my neighbor?
Yeah.
And if I trust my neighbor, if I respect my neighbor, then I'm going to respect that they may have differences of opinions, and they may have voted differently.
Yeah. No doubt.
But I don't believe that it's just going to be some free-for-all with, listen, you can't get anything done anywhere without somebody finding out about it. I mean, there's more leaks in Washington than anything else. And yet you're telling me that we can rig an election.
Yeah.
You know? I mean...
Yep.
But no leaks have come out about this, about, like, here's the smoking gun. Like,
we Americans in this, we love conspiracies, man.
We do. But we love it. But it's become the perfect...
Only if it fits our own belief narrative.
But it's become the perfect bubble of when you have so much time at home and you're working from home.
No question.
And all of a sudden you've got the TV on in the background 24 hours, and you're watching the COVID numbers, and you're watching death numbers tick up. And it's all about the rise of COVID and how many people are dying and how many people have recovered. And do we even understand the numbers?
Yeah.
You know, all we're doing is watching ticker tapes.
Right.
The stock market's going this way, but there's a death over here, and it just went down.
Well, we're being spoon-fed that stuff.
Yeah, and we need to shut it off and just say, like, I'm going to go outside for a walk. I mean, seriously, 2 hours a day of a brisk walk. That's a 15-minute mile pace. There's a lot of folks running. Heck, if I can pull off 15-minute miles for 70 miles, I'm going to be beyond excited.
Life changing for me, man. 90 minutes a day.
Yeah, but all of a sudden
crazy.
You clear your mind.
Oh, absolutely.
You also see the beauty of everything around you.
Yeah. Well, I'm walking in downtown Coraopolis repeatedly, round and round. I don't know what kind of, at midnights, I don't know what kind of beauty I'm seeing, but the mental clarity is incredible.
But it could be worse. You still see your neighbors with their businesses.
No question.
And because you're walking in your neighborhood,
no doubt,
you're mentally forcing yourself into a circle. This is my neighborhood, and I have to protect my neighborhood. Yes. And I have to work to help my neighbors. Which means supporting my businesses.
Yes, and more people would see that and acknowledge that on a regular basis.
Yeah. But if all you're doing is living in, but that's what people are doing online. They're walking around their social media neighborhood.
No doubt.
And all they're doing is seeing that same.
Good point.
And if they were to walk around their own neighborhood.
Yeah. In reality.
Yeah, if they were to just walk their streets.
In the physical world.
And every person they saw, they just said, "Hey, how's it going? I don't know you. I'm Dan. How's it going, Joe?"
And how hard is that, really?
Yeah, I mean, I get a lot of weird looks when I'm running by people, and I'm like, "Hey, how's it going?" And they're like, they're in their bubble, and I'm like, "But, it's," and I have to remember not to like run up on people when I'm running at 6 in the morning, and like, it totally freaks them out because I'm usually without a headlamp, and it's like, I still breathe like I'm a smoker. They should be able to hear me coming a mile away, but they've got their headphones in. But, just, walk around the neighborhood with your kids.
Right.
And you see somebody, just say hi.
Yeah. That's where it all starts.
And that's, we've lived in a neighborhood for 8 years, and we still know very few people there.
Right.
That's not the neighborhood's fault. That's not the town's fault. It's our fault.
I get it.
We never said we're going to do everything we can to make this a home.
Got it.
So, I think we've got to come back to being a community with neighbors. We've got to put our neighborhood first. And our neighborhood isn't just, my block. It's the town that I live in. And it's recognizing and having apathy, having sympathy for those who are going through something different than I am. But it's also realizing that they're not my enemies, that their views aren't we may have different views.
We shouldn't be assuming that from strangers anyways. Where do we get that mindset?
Yeah, but we still, at the end of the day, we're a parent trying to raise a kid.
Right.
Or we're an adult trying to go to work.
Right.
And really, if we start the day believing that I want what's best for my country, but so does the person beside me.
Yeah.
That conversation comes back. I don't believe for a minute that Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi hate this country.
Yeah, I don't either.
I think that I don't agree with them. I think that they're, it gets too easy to just say, oh, Pelosi's eating her freezer full of ice cream and we got Moscow Mitch. Mm-hmm. But you can't tell me that they don't love this country.
Right.
If we want to get rid of that, if we want to get rid of them, let's install term limits.
Yeah,
there's a whole other conversation.
That would have solved the problem.
But you can't tell me that they hate America.
Yeah.
You don't devote that much energy.
That's just simplistic thinking.
Yeah.
That's not sophisticated thinking. If you think that way and you label people and identify them and then move on and don't give it any more thought, we're just lazy in thinking.
Sure.
Has to be.
And you can't tell me that AOC hates the country.
Yep.
Or,
agreed.
Or that, Ted Cruz hates the country.
Yeah.
Like, these are people who have a difference of opinion, but they truly believe that it's for the necessary good of the country. And I guarantee you, if they were willing to go across party lines on things,
they'd
the
find
conversations
commonality
that they could have.
They would find commonality. They would. There's no question.
Yeah, and if they wouldn't answer to lobbyists, if they wouldn't put a lobbyist to be before a constituent,
well, certainly.
The reality is they love this country, and just
I
like you and
that.
I do,
I believe
I believe that my neighbors do.
I believe that,
and I believe that there are people who are embarrassed by things that we've done. But if we're not embarrassed at some point, then we don't actually have conviction. We just kind of flow with the wind.
Good point.
We have to have conviction, but we also have to have respect for each other.
Agreed. My friend, this has been amazing. It's been long overdue.
It's been a lot of rambling, man. I apologize.
No, not at all. Matter of fact, I know you're short on time today, but I want to invite you back. I want to get into your travels.
Yeah, I'd love to talk photography.
I want to talk some photography.
Yeah,
and your travels and so forth. I'm talking about having you back relatively soon. If you're game.
Yeah, for sure.
Dan, I appreciate it.
Awesome, man. Appreciate it.
All right, friends, we are out.
You're listening to the Eric McKenna Project.